All right, well, we've got a quorum now, so we will go ahead and get started. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Bajent. Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Willetts. Whittings.
Here.
4 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. All right. Ooh, I've got an echo in my mic. I'm going to have Courtney jump in. This end of year meeting is our opportunity to go through the impact that we've had around the priorities that we share for the city, as well as talk about what's ahead. And so really looking forward to a conversation so that first off, to share the advancements we've made in the areas of housing and the economy and climate and public safety, among others, but then also to have a conversation with each of you as council members about priorities for the year ahead so that we can better bring both presentations to council at work session and council meetings, but also align the work that we're doing to ensure that we are creating a city for everyone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Courtney Washburn. I'm the Chief of Staff for the City of Boise. And today I hope to go through the accomplishments and priorities identified by our directors, and then the priorities of the mayor and council that I'm aware of. And as the mayor alluded to, I'm here to collect feedback and questions for follow-up. As you all know, I can't possibly know everything about everything that's happening in the city. I sit before you today with the privilege of representing the work of thousands of individuals. So with that, I have a PowerPoint prepared. I also have copies of the PowerPoint at your table. And what I hope to do is just go through slides on each of these issues. And again, hopefully have a discussion about your thoughts or feedback or questions on these issues. And if we run short on time, which I suspect we might, I can also return with the rest of the items. This is not an all-inclusive list. And the reason I'm presenting this information is just to give you short bits of information so that I can actually collect more information from you as we schedule the council meetings and work sessions in 2023. So with that, if someone can pull up the slideshow, awesome. And shout out to CE for making these slides so pretty. The strategic priority areas of the city are usually contained in each of these buckets: a safe and healthy community, a home for everyone, a movement for everyone, a clean city for all, opportunity for everyone, engaging everyone, and then some of the internal projects that are critical to making the other priorities happen. So I thought I'd start with safe and healthy community, which is really focused on fire. As you know, we plan to redo Fire Station 5, which is downtown, which will include all electric, state-of-the-art engine in addition to infrastructure. This building, given its historical significance, will also have historic and artifacts that have been archived as it relates to fire. And then Fire Station 13 will be a brand new station, which is set to break ground. Moving forward, Fire has completed a 10-year strategic plan, thanks to the hard work of Chief Niemeyer. What is critical about a 10-year strategic plan, both for fire and police, is it gets us out of the year-to-year decisions associated with public services that obviously need to grow as our community grows. This 10-year strategic plan should be presented to you. I think we have it slated for late February. We're waiting on police to complete theirs to bring them at the same time. The significance of those plans and the investment, I think we're at 56% of our budget goes to public safety. So where we build things, how we build them, how we staff our facilities is critically important. And I'll revisit that on this slide for police. As you know, I think it was your last council meeting, the National Park Service Training Collaboration was presented to you, which unfortunately will bring in some funding associated with future training. And then the fire department is super focused on recruiting women into the Boise Fire Department. I can't remember off the top of my head how many female firefighters we have, but it's clear we can do a better job recruiting them and keeping them within the fire department.
And I'll just jump in here. The council president pointed it out at the last council meeting, but our training facility had not been used in partnership and with others and as a revenue source before, and that was a goal of ours. And so I see this as the first of what I hope would be more opportunities where we can share the investment that we made in the asset of a training center, but create a revenue stream to help support it in the long run. So to save money for our residents.
Madam Mayor, thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate it. I have a question around the strategic plan. I assume that Chief Niemeyer is working with PDS to understand where we are projecting growth and how we're going to serve that.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I think you just took my talking points at some point down the line, which is great. The key to the 10-year strategic plan, both for fire and police, is a much better population estimate for the city. So currently, this plan has been based on the population growth as presented by Compass, but Director Keene has been really clear that if the city, with the zoning code rewrite and other planning, we should be able to get far more granular on where people are going to live and how they're going to live, which should drive the location of fire facilities. For example, their plan based on other population estimates have fire stations in places the city would probably not actually approve. So Tim is supposed to come before you in January with population estimates for the city itself, in addition to some other pieces. So we will update the draft plan fire currently has with the updated population estimates.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that because we've needed to do that for a while. Thanks.
Anything else on fire before I jump to police?
Madam Mayor, I'm really happy to see the information here about the effort to recruit more women to firefighting. We had a wonderful collaboration with the Girl Scouts back in 2019 where we provided an opportunity to use those wonderful facilities that Council President Clegg mentioned. And of course, because of COVID, we couldn't really continue the momentum of that, but I just want to give a shout out to firefighter Casey Homick, who stoked that fire and put on 2 events this year, one geared towards teen girls and one towards women who were just had an interest in this field, and was able to speak to the group. And it was an inspiring bunch to see that room filled with all these different women who were motivated to try this vocation. So I really appreciate seeing that effort continue.
All right. Now we're headed to the Boise Police Department. The department added a community liaison officer to serve the Asian American Pacific Islander community. This brings the city's liaison officers to 5. That was just my question, so I went ahead and answered it for you all. And then, as you're aware, we established the human and civil rights training for the Boise Police Department. They started the training, and as you may be aware, senior leaders within the city have now also started the training, and we're working our way through all our employees. And I believe you were also all given the opportunity to go through this program as well. And then I don't know, this was on a previous, I think, consent agenda, and it wasn't until I dug deeper did I understand, but we secured a JAG grant to fund officer and an employee wellness program. And this is a pretty key source of funding to ensure our officers are getting the support they need and doing the challenging jobs they have. So I just wanted to call that piece out. And then moving forward, I'm just going to dive into what I see as the key elements for the strategic plans for both fire and police.
Before you move on, oh, it looks like you're going to talk about it, facility planning. So I will save my questions for later. Thank you.
Yeah, and this, before Courtney jumps into this one, the strategic plan and facilities planning, and we believe is important. And I'd actually tie it even to officer wellness and community service in general, because the city has not had a facilities and strategic plan that again looks at growth and determines where we ought to place substations beyond the downtown core that both make it easier for residents to connect with our police department and then easier for our officers to spend less time moving back and forth, but more time in community. And so this is the basis of that.
Madam Mayor, the key building blocks to the strategic plan, in my mind, are to identify the growth opportunities, and that's pretty critical to the population estimates and the expected growth within the city. At least I would imagine from your perspective, it establishes the foundation for decision making. So you see the whole picture over a longer period of time when these individual decisions come before you. And then we need to focus on staff expansion, including recruitment, both in the police department and the fire department. And then, as you've seen over the last 2 years, the investment in equipment needs and the needs to update those has significant impact to the budget and the department. And then, as the mayor mentioned, facilities planning. The police department currently is housed at City Hall West, the downtown substation, and then a small location in City Hall. Fire Station 13 is planned to have a place for them to go to do things while they're on patrol, which is different than what City Hall West provides for police with security of equipment and clearances that are required for the police department. But it is clear from our population growth and our patterns that we're lacking a strategy for facility planning as it relates to police. It's not in our capital plans. There's no expansion currently planned, which is likely insufficient to grow this department as we move forward. And I'd super be open to anything else you may want for staff to consider as we complete these strategic plans to bring them before you in February.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Before we leave this general topic, I just wanted to see, is part of the plan to collaborate with other organizations such as, I think about one of the young women who participated in that firefighter training program back in 2019. She's now a firefighter with NAMPA. She was 16, 3 years have passed, and maybe our program was a little gateway to that, but she went on to participate with the CWI program. And there's actually quite a few different trainings that she received throughout our area. And I think it was just something she cobbled together. I think it would be great if we could talk to Ivy Denon and find out how did you go from being a 16-year-old trying out firefighting at a Girl Scout program, with BFD, to now being hired on at Nampa Fire. So I think if we could do that, make sure that we have those partnerships in place. Not everybody's an Ivy who's just going to take that initiative and look for those opportunities in the community. It's maybe perhaps something we could be working on as well.
Mayor, thank you for bringing this forward. I do have a couple of things. One, recognizing how many times our officers are asked to respond to mental health calls. I think it would be a good idea to strategically look at that, not just for the wellness of officers, which we have on the prior page, not just for the decision-making, but in terms of how we staff it, how we design it, what we do to at least attempt to make it so that both the police and community members have a better outcome when there's a mental health issue. So that would be a really important one for me. The other one, I'm really glad to see you're talking about facilities planning, as I've been learning about the different kinds of staff who travel around a city but don't have a home base, police among them, having somewhere to stop, go to the bathroom, take a break, get a little, plug in your computer for 5 minutes, whatever it is incredibly important. And not just a place to do that, but a place that's well outfitted. So it's not just a corner somewhere that's forgotten and otherwise dirty, but it's a place that's actually put together for them that they can feel good about being in and spending time in. So as we go forward with this, I'd really encourage them to plan well for that. I think it would, over the long term, it will really pay off in officer wellness.
Madam Mayor, on this topic, I just want to add, I really liked the conversations that have been going on about co-location of facilities, not only in public safety, but looking at what other facilities we have around the city, whether, there's a good co-location opportunity with a park to have, a substation or a parks facility or whatever that might be around the city. I think there's a lot of efficiency to be picked up there, just as far as maintenance and kind of ongoing equipment and that kind of stuff. So looking at those opportunities, and then back to the topic of mental health, I think that there is likely an opportunity, if we look at some of these recent incidents, to potentially do some partnerships with like IDOC and others, the state police, on really how we address mental health crisis, what we know about the folks who are having these mental health crises in the community, and how we can have some better outcomes through some potential partnerships with like health and welfare and others. So I appreciate it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
we have the focus on staff expansion, including recruitment. And I apologize if I missed this, but I don't believe we've completed our staffing evaluation plan that we've been working on for a couple of years. And I'm wondering if we're going to check in on that at some point.
Yes, that will factor into the facilities plan, growth numbers, and kind of different officer types we need, including mental health officers, et cetera, will all factor into that staffing study.
Great. Yeah, I hope that when we're looking at that, we can look at the expanding needs of what those positions actually look like. Right now, I think we're actually back down to only one behavioral health response team. I think we're up to 2. If that's something that we want to see grow in the future, if there's other types of positions that are out there that are more specific. And so as we're really looking at that staff expansion, trying to figure out like, what are those exact roles that we need? And so I think it would be great I know at some point we're going to be talking about future work sessions, but it would be great to, I think, have the police department come to us to kind of let us know what some of those evolving positions may look like, as well as, our own sort of research, what we're doing across the country on expanding police roles, or the different types of roles that are out there for the expanding expectations, that we're continually pushing that direction.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if you'd like to speak to potential collaboration with our surrounding cities as it relates to policing.
Sure, thanks. The Treasure Valley Partnership had a meeting. It was probably 2 weeks ago, and it was a meeting where all the members of the Treasure Valley Partnership came together. So that's mayors, some county commissioners, pretty much from Mountain Home, all the way to Marsing, and then the chiefs of police for those jurisdictions, or the sheriffs for the counties. Our chief of police as well as deputy chief attended. And what was striking from the conversations that we had, both counties presented, various cities presented, was a staffing challenge at all sizes of organizations, all police departments and sheriff's agencies. And it was actually the Ada County Sheriff suggested that we look at some kind of pipelines for folks and collaboration in terms of developing those pipelines. If the county, say, the sheriff said, if the county gets somebody that's not quite ready, but this person would be ready to work for Ada County at the jail or something else, then to help facilitate that through conversations amongst agencies so that we're preparing people for the next step up in the future. And I did suggest at that meeting that the police departments come together, since Garden City mentioned it, Ada County mentioned it, Canyon County mentioned it, I think Caldwell mentioned it, that the police departments come together with some suggestions to bring back to us, so that as decision makers, we could work with them to create that pipeline and find the employees that all of our agencies need. Because every agency that spoke talked about the number of applicants they used to get, the number of applicants they get today, and then the tiny number of those applicants that actually are qualified or the people that the various departments would want to hire. And we need to get officers on the streets in our communities. And so I saw this as a step collaboratively that we could do to address recruiting needs.
Madam Mayor, I'm really glad to hear that. I just mentioned one thing I've run into in my work in the Wood River Valley. It's not just police officers, it's other kinds of specialty positions in cities. In that case, operators for their water system who are certified by EPA to do the things that they need to do are very difficult to find. And so it might be interesting to talk, and I've already started this discussion at AIC about really thinking broadly about training for positions that are unique to cities and hard to hire.
That makes me think of in private industry, we always talk about collaborating with like vocational technical organizations like CWI, like how do we get employees who know CAD, who know, these kind of basic things. And I'm wondering if it never really occurred to me that transfers over to the public sector also. Are there ways that we can collaborate with places like CWI on doing some kind of basic sort of education where folks aren't going for, a criminal justice degree at Boise State, but maybe they're going for an associate's degree in something law enforcement related to kind of prepare. So just a thought.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to make a previous comment regarding the council president's flag on mental health and our police officers. I think we also might want to look at that for fire, which is why I am planning to bring both together. Often both our firefighters and our police officers are there at the same time as it relates to both mental health and then medical health. And I think we've started the conversation to look at medical response and the use of, ladder trucks and the big engines. I see this as a similar space when they're usually both there, and sometimes it's medical and sometimes it's a mental health emergency. And are we prepared, and how do those two work together in those spaces, in addition to collaborating and trying to find ways not to be in those situations at all, if that helps.
Thank you. That's a great point. And as they're both doing their strategic plans right now, it'd be a great opportunity.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've learned over the past several years, discussions about police as it relates to the public have been tied to concerns about racism, discrimination, that sort of thing. And, as we have just experienced within our own community, with the revelation of Matthew Bringelson's association with white supremacy, something I've been concerned about is the mental health of our staff, even beyond BPD or fire, specifically people of color. I don't know that we've communicated to them that we support them in any way in terms of getting mental health care. And I don't know if everybody who works within the city of Boise has access to mental health care. It's not an assumption I want to make, but I think it's something that we definitely should look at how do we make sure that people are okay. I chatted briefly with Councilman Halliburton. Both of us were mentioned by this individual, and it's a chilling thing to have something like that happen. Fortunately, I see a therapist every other week, and I had that support. But I think about the folks who maybe have not been considered in terms of how they feel, having heard this information, working in an environment where they were with somebody who they were unaware held these views. And I just think it's something that we need to be aware of. And if there's anything we can do to make sure that folks have access to mental health care regarding that, I think it's something we should look at.
Madam Mayor, council member, we can certainly bring back at a work session the benefits we provide to general employees in addition to those who are more on the front lines, which is usually police and fire, who do those supports differently. But if you would like us to come back so that you can see the full array of opportunities we have for employees to seek the help they need, we can certainly do that. Madam Mayor, anything else on police before I'm headed to housing next? Okay. So as you all are aware, we went from a small staff in our housing unit, expanded it, and then expanded the city's investment in housing, both because it's a priority of our community and a priority of yours. So I'm just going to go through some of the accomplishments and then remind you of the things that are currently in progress. This has a lot of numbers and a lot of projects, so I'll try not to speed through it. So with your support, we allocated $12 million of the ARPA funding to create and preserve affordable housing. We celebrated the completion or preservation of 73 affordable homes. And these include either city acquisition, city support, working with private developers to add more affordable homes in their developments. I think you all are aware of the Thomas Logan apartments that are downtown, which provides 45 affordable homes. Taft Homes, which provided 2 affordable single-family homes at the Collister United Methodist Church, and then the Sage Mobile Home Park, where we purchased that to preserve 26 affordable homes. And then we piloted 2 innovative programs to explore the use of ADUs and movable tiny homes. I don't know if any of you were able to go to the model ADU tour. I think it was in the last month. And it really is pretty cool to see plug and play designs that could go in all sorts of different locations in the city. If you weren't able to check it out, we can make that opportunity available moving forward.
And just to remind everybody, that came out of the housing innovation project that our office did and went out to community, got feedback, was in parks. It was a year-long process of hearing from the community what was needed and then getting feedback on what might work. And then we launched this ADU program.
Madam Mayor, I was unable to go on the tour. I think I was out of town. I can't remember. I would love to do it. My question is, now that we've completed the pilot, what next? What are we going to do with what we learned from it so that we can actually get more of these built? And then the second thing, just a quick note, Thomas Logan, is new build. It is on a site that was originally mostly a surface parking lot that had about 5 or 6 affordable units. So we've actually, we now have many more affordable units in that particular location than were there originally. So sometimes preservation is the right strategy and sometimes new build is the right strategy. I just want to make sure we keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But I would like to know what's next on the pilot.
And I will be happy to follow up with that, both the ADUs and the movable tiny homes. Happy to do that. And so the housing pipeline, which we've gone over, my slide keeps blinking in and out, so bear with me. The housing pipeline is really because these projects take a bit of time and quite a bit of investment to be completed. So we have 1,238 homes. Under construction are 5 projects, which is the Moda Franklin, the Workland subdivision, the Coal Bluff Cottages, Celebration Acres, and Stewart Avenue. Approved by P&Z, we have 1 project, which is 101 homes at State and Arthur. In pre-development, we have 3 projects, which is Denton New Path 2.0 and Fire Station 5. We need to start calling the housing at Fire Station 5 something other than Fire Station 5. As I'm reading the slide, the city is making use of the land it has at Fire Station 5 to add housing to the footprint, but the fire station will be separate from the affordable housing. But in your discussion about co-location, I think one of the other things we need to look at is the facilities we have versus their footprint. For example, we did the inventory of the city-owned property that didn't have anything on it. I think we should go back particularly and look at the footprint of some of the fire stations to see if we can't add some other facilities to those pieces of property. And then in due diligence, we have 2 projects, McKinney and El Dorado and Capitol Campus. And then the Housing Impact Fund update is the market analysis from the consultants is expected in January.
Madam Mayor, kudos to staff for getting this many units in progress. And it really is a great portfolio that is all over the city as well as all kinds of housing. One thing we might, as we do these kind of reviews, also list somehow, and I know they're not directly city projects, but for instance, the city's working with Boise City Ada County Housing on the Moore Street property. And that will bring ultimately, I don't know how many units, but some more units into use. You noted the LEAP Charities partnership. I think there are probably some other
right, there are.
partnerships, and it just would be good as we're going through this to understand what they all are.
Yeah, as you say that, I'm even thinking about the one on 28th Street, the local roundhouse that has a certain number of units that they committed to early on.
And the one on Boise Ave.
Yep. So that's well noted, is to also look at the partnerships that we have throughout the city that are floating this number even higher.
Madam Mayor, we also probably want to make sure through the zoning code rewrite, given that the emphasis is on affordability, making sure we're tracking those projects to come through the new code as well. Anything else on housing before I move into homeless services?
I don't have anything to add. I just want to say good job. I mean, we weren't looking at anything like this a few years back, and this is a really great pipeline.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I just want to call out one particular purchase that I think is really powerful, and that would be the preservation of Sage Mobile Home Park. I had the opportunity to visit with a mobile home park owner in Meridian who owns a few mobile home parks. And it was a very inspiring conversation. The gentleman told me about the diversity of the folks who use his facility. And just there's a very particular type of community that rises up with folks and folks coming from all different types of background, folks who are hoping to save money so they can be homeowners someday. The folks that he had using his facility go to the lineman college, traveling nurses, folks in transition, divorced parents who are, trying to make sure that they can support their families as they move on. but it was incredibly inspiring just to hear how the folks in these communities become very tight-knit, very supportive. And I'm hoping that moving forward, I think it's wonderful that we preserve this. I think we need more of this. I think we need more different types of housing for folks because not everybody lives the same kind of life. And I think this type of housing product is really good for folks who are in transition. Whether it's pursuing education or providing a service that we need. As you know, we've needed these traveling nurses here in Boise. So it's just something I would like to highlight. And I'm really proud that we purchased this facility.
Madam Mayor, I think Councilmember Sanchez reminds me that because of the crises we've had in housing, we've sort of set aside the notion of what's the long-term plan for helping people build wealth. Always used to be home ownership. I don't know if that's the future. I don't know what the future is, but we should, as we think about the future, maybe infuse it with at least some thinking about how do we help people build wealth if they're not going to be homeowners, or how do we help them be homeowners if we think that's still the path to that.
All right, and now I have some information about homeless services. So 26 million in emergency assistance was distributed to more than 5,000 households, preventing possible evictions. And we also provided utility relief through a partnership with the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority. The city has formed internally a cross-department team to ensure everyone who's working in this area is coordinated to provide the best service possible to the impacted community, both in the short term and the long term. And then the implementation of permanent supportive housing, some of those projects I just provided an update on are to both acquire the housing, but to find the resources to provide the services that need to go along with those homes. And then moving forward, we have a continued partnership with Our Path Home. As you all are aware, we need to find more money to meet the need in this space. We will continue to work with external partners in crisis and to bring the permanent supportive housing online. The two developments in the pipeline are New Path 2.0, which is 96 units, and Fire Station 5, again, I will name it something else, with 60 units. And then, as I mentioned, in this space in particular, we have a growing need and the need for partnership. I do believe we have a proposed joint meeting with Ada County on the books for late January, early February. And then we increasingly have been working with partners to see how we can leverage more resources in these spaces.
Madam Mayor, I have something that kind of combines the last conversation about housing with kind of our homeless service. I think that we used to see, like back in the 50s and 60s, and we have these developments around downtown, a real focus on low-income housing for seniors. There's the tower over on Fort Street. There's one over by St. Luke's. There's one on near the Albertsons on 16th. But I don't think that anything has really been built to serve specifically that community since then in a really meaningful way. And I think that as we were helping Interfaith respond to homelessness throughout COVID and all of the medically fragile folks that we have, and I know that now I don't want to call it Fire Station 5, but I'm going to have to. I know that that is designed and to be focused on some of the medically fragile folks. But I think that as we're talking about housing, we've talked about supportive permanent housing for families. But I think that there's also a missing piece of that conversation, which is the elderly and folks that are kind of in that post-retirement age on extremely fixed incomes, maybe living on Social Security, and how we're really focusing in on that. So I know that it used to be a focus. It hasn't been for a long time. And so it might be a conversation that's worth having again.
You know, I appreciate that flag because it's not just that. I think Mercy was built, wasn't Mercy along the Pioneer Pathway, senior housing? But you're right, there were funds available at different periods of time from the federal government and others to make housing for seniors possible. I think it's a great conversation to be had as we look at needs, and beyond the public-private partnership of developing housing like we've looked at for New Path and the place formerly known as the parking lot at Fire Station 5, and whatever else. There's also the circuit breaker that we've expanded from a Boise perspective addresses those on fixed incomes. But I want to see a more meaningful support from a property tax relief perspective for residents on fixed incomes and over 65 as well. And I'm having conversations with legislators about whether or not something like that is possible in both the short and long run. So with the strategy of keeping people housed where they're at and they've always lived, as well as your suggestion that we look at how we build partnership to do housing, I think is a key one.
Madam Mayor, over the last few years, I've talked to some constituents who are very passionate about the concept of co-housing because they do want to, as we say, age in place. But there's another group in our population who also I think could benefit from more opportunities for housing, and that is our university students. I know there are other communities where they bring those two populations together. So here, you know, as we grow older, we assume we grow wiser, and we are walking libraries, and we have all this knowledge. And then we've got this group of folks who are starting out their lives. They both need housing. They both need it to be affordable. But I would argue we also need them to be in the same room together. I don't know about the rest of you, but as I've campaigned, those two demographics have worked very closely. And to see them come together and bring their particular talents and skills to each other, it's really inspiring. And I come from a culture where we value folks who are older than us. We look to them as elders and wise people. And I don't speak perfect Spanish, but the Spanish I speak is thanks to my grandmother, who never went to school a day in her life. I see an opportunity for us to bring together our university students and the folks who deserve respect in our community. They are elders. They have a lot of wisdom and experience that I think they could share. And to bring those resources together. As we've worked on our rental support, it's both parties who are struggling. We've got university students who have to pay increasing university costs, and then you add rising costs in housing. We have our older folks who have had those property taxes really take a toll on them. So I do see an opportunity for us to be creative and innovative in that regard.
Madam Mayor. So thanks for mentioning the federal pipeline, because it really has played into what both the city and our partners have been able to do. Boise City, Ada County Housing built those three buildings back in the day because there was specifically federal funding available for it. And while those units opened, mostly populated with elderly or citizens, today they're mostly populated with those who are disabled. It's a population that's also growing that didn't get much support federally, and those units over time became available to both elderly and disabled. And I think it points out that there's probably a shortage for both populations, frankly, today. And so I don't know with the new Inflation Reduction Act or other changes in federal law if there's going to be more opportunity, but I can tell you the Housing Authority, which I attend as an ex officio, is closely watching all of those things and looking for those opportunities. They do have on their agenda tomorrow an opportunity to look at the project-based vouchers. And so Anyway, I think it's a good point. The one last point I'd like to make, we know that the homeless population is growing. We don't know if that's just the immediate crisis and it's going to change. But I am really glad to see the last piece of this slide with coordination with partners. It's, I guess, my expectation that at least in the short term, we're going to need more shelter housing or temporary housing of some kind. I don't know what it is, but we should be thinking about it soon because we're now extending the hotel stays to April. What happens then? We just don't have enough of that kind of housing available. And if partners can help us, we should be looking at figuring out what that is.
And last but not least in this space is the zoning code rewrite. We'll return with the zoning code rewrite and module 3, I think early in January. And then I'll work with leadership and council members to time this all the way through both the planning and zoning process in addition to council approval and effective dates. So stay tuned for more on that. And Madam Mayor, in the interest of time, movement for everyone is probably the last topic I can touch on, but I know it's near and dear to the heart of several council members. And I will come back to trees, Council President, next time.
No, actually, you've got till 45.
Madam Mayor, you indicated you wanted to take a break.
I would like you to keep going.
Okay. I was just reminding you. I both get to remind you
Have
about
so
your
many,
schedule
we have
and
so,
present.
we've made so much progress. I want you to keep talking about it.
Madam Mayor, a movement for everyone highlights the installation of pedestrian crosswalks at 23rd and Bannock and Boise Avenue and Manitou. We worked really hard to help VRT obtain the $8.5 million grant to target bus station improvements on State Street, as well as ADA improvements to existing facilities. And then the city provided seed funding to the Living Independence Network to purchase an adaptive training van to teach those with mobility disabilities to drive. And then, Madam Mayor, a highlight on pathways as requested by the council. This project is underway. I think it will be enhanced and improved with a dedicated staff member who begins in January and will take over this body of work. 2 pathways have been designated. The bench in West Boise, 6 pathway easements were approved through the development process. 12 more are recommended in current action letters. 2 more projects are in the immediate queue. And then just a reminder that the master plan associated with this is 112 miles of new pathways throughout the city.
Madam Mayor, I do have a comment on this one. I'm really proud of all the staff's work and what we've been able to do, especially finding some of those key connections. We still haven't necessarily found a larger project yet that I think could really build that community support, where you're talking about a longer distance, where there's a focused effort and community outreach that it takes to make that happen. And I think that that sort of project is going to be what gets the other ones kind of up and going and moving a little bit faster. I also, when I was thinking about that earlier today, remembered that we had a project that went in on State Street. It's probably a year and a half ago or so. And there wasn't a great way for anyone to get from there all the way down to Glenwood. And we had mentioned a priority to try to make sure that we were figuring out some type of solution, long-term or temporary, to get that part of town. And we've seen it happen again and again on State Street, where we're putting in these really great places for people to live without really a great place to walk, or ride their bike anywhere. And so I think that that has to be one of the areas that we're looking at going further, whether it is a shorter term solution that we find or some of these longer term ones. But I do think that that identification of a long range pathway will be sort of that tipping point. And it's really exciting that we now have some staff members to help get that done. And I think some support from our different agencies as well.
All right, moving from pathways into Vision Zero, I believe this update was requested by council members. So in March of 2022, the city council passed a resolution to endorse safe systems approach to reducing fatal and serious injury crashes in Boise. I believe I always enjoy giving presentations to the council president who by far knows more about the things than I do. So feel free to chime in. But the staff engaged Compass to request a safety action plan to address the creation of high industry injury network map, and then to do a template to evaluate the effectiveness of safe system designs. I believe we applied for a Safety First Challenge grant. We were not awarded that, so the city plans on reapplying, and we will increase awareness on the city's website for all vehicle related crash data. I think I have another slide. And these were identified by staff as the 2023 priorities. This issue will also have a person dedicated to the project moving forward, which is a mobility and public space manager who I believe we're in the hiring process for both of these positions, the one on pathways and the one who will oversee Vision Zero. And these are just some of the priorities identified moving forward.
Mayor, I'll be real quick here. One thing I just want to make sure that our new staff is aware of as this safety action plan is put together, that the high injury network map should be the basis for understanding what are the systemic issues at those injury sites, and then applying that knowledge to the rest of the network to figure out where those systemic issues also occur. And that really is the heart of a safe systems approach. Our previous approach has always been to say, oh, there was an injury here, let's fix this. And not, oh, there was an injury here, what was the cause of that injury systemically? And where else in the system does that cause exist? And how can we work on all of it? So I'm confident that our new staff person knows that, but just wanted to put it on the record.
Madam Mayor, I'm glad to see this dedicated position because I think that, you know, in addition to Vision Zero, I'm anticipating that this person would have a lot of expertise in things like, where are we seeing people parking in bike lanes in the city? How are we addressing that? Where are, you know, ADA ped ramps impeded by various things? Do we have issues with delivery trucks utilizing certain areas and creating unsafe conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists? So I think that there's a big body of work in the city that has yet to kind of be addressed by code enforcement and police and other, you know, kind of bringing those things together. And so I would hope that this position is also focused on some of those things.
Madam Mayor, again, excited for the same things that my fellow council members have already brought up. Really excited about the grant that we're hopeful that Compass will be able to help out with this with some really long range planning. And the third kind of point on this slide, I think that there are things that we can do within the city while we're waiting for those things. And to Council President Clegg's point, there's some very systemic things that we can address when we get some of these plans, but we know that speed is one of them already. And we know that we've been putting new development on all sorts of different streets throughout the city. I'm going to use State Street in Northwest Boise as another example where it's simply not safe, the old speed limits that we have there with the new development. And so I hope that that speed is something that we can really prioritize. And I think that that's something that we'll find we have a lot of community support from. The last thing I wanted to bring up is in regards to Vision Zero, is there's sort of a complementing system that's out there, our bicycle friendly community status, which the city of Boise has just expired. And they actually just created a brand new bicycle friendly community application that highlights equity and infrastructure related to safe systems. And so there's a complementary application process that's really, really helpful, I think, for the city to go through, because it allows us to measure everything that we have and then to get feedback on areas where we can grow. And so I think that might be something for this position, and I know the person who's in this position is very familiar with it and did a lot of work in Fort Collins with us as well. So I think that that's something that should probably be on our radar as a complementing measure for the city.
Thanks. All right. And now we have hit time. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break. And then, so the work session in January, it's my hope then that we'll pick this back up. But we want to make sure that we hear from Chloe on the ARPA projects. And then we have the team from Steptoe here. So we will get this scheduled so to be continued.
Madam Mayor, can I offer one more comment from Councilmember Willetts, who is attending her daughter's graduation like right now? She was wanting to kind of focus on library, what our plans are for and how library strategic planning is going, and walkability to parks.
Great.
Were two focus areas for her.
And so that's actually in some ways perfect that this is to be continued, because both the library and kind of goals for walkability to parks are in this packet of slides we haven't yet gotten to. Perfect. All right.
That'll give Councilmember Bajan a chance to pipe in too. He didn't have a chance yet.
So we've got a 10-minute break. All right, we're all here. We might as well get started. Chloe, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back here. I am back to give you an update on the ARPA community projects. And I've got a couple slides and they're probably taking a second to pull up. There we go. Perfect. So as you may recall, I came to you in November with an update on childcare and the small business projects. And after the presentation, you approved the agreements with United Way, IAEYC, and the YMCA. I am here this morning to provide kind of like a little bit of a broader context, a quick overview of the childcare and small business projects and how they are going. And then I want to dive deeper into the food security and mental health, because there are agreements on this council agenda for your approval, and then also for the January 10th council meeting. The intention is that I'm providing you the information today, and then won't be back until probably later on in the springtime of next year with some kind of more substantive updates on where we're at with food security and mental health. As you recall, the Child Care Council allocated $3 million for child care incentive stipends. We are actively sending out checks right now, and that final round will come next week. I believe it's Tuesday, so the week of December 19th. That is $15,000 for eligible childcare workers, and we're aiming for about 1,245 workers to receive the checks. The small business grant application is currently open. It will remain open until the end of January, upon which we will review all of the applications and for eligibility, and then prioritize those accordingly. At this moment in time, we have about 500 applications to date, and they're coming in pretty consistently. I'm reading the reports where United Way is sending us a report every week, essentially. We have funding for approximately 480 businesses to receive the $4,000 grant. And we have been fielding questions from potential applicants on a regular basis through the ARPA email inbox. Transitioning over to food security, where we have a little more information for you on this. Council allocated $1.5 million, and we opened up a notice of funding opportunity over the summer. City of Good applied and has been awarded that NOFO, with the scope of increasing food security in general across the city by distributing fresh products from local farms to all of our residents across the city, but particularly those who are in need of fresh and local produce. So City of Good will use the money to expand and enhance the existing programs that they have going on to distribute prepared meals, fresh produce, and culturally relevant shelf-stable foods. Part of their proposal was partnering with the Idaho Botanical Gardens and the Boise Farmers Market. And specifically in scope is that they would build additional fresh food storage to extend sort of the life of the fresh produce, acquire electric refrigerated delivery vehicles so they can be moving around the city and serving different neighborhoods and expanding that service. They will also identify spoke organizations to increase capacity. So identifying organizations in the community that can even expand and have access to different neighborhoods and community groups. And then integral to this is working towards a permanent year-round farmers market at the Idaho Botanical Gardens.
Madam Mayor, Chloe, could I quickly ask, I'm glad to hear they're getting a refrigerated truck. Is there a plan for maintaining that?
Good question, Council Member Clegg. Yes, there are plans to maintain that. I think maybe I will answer the question by saying this. This first phase, this $150,000 that will go to them initially is for a strategic planning phase. So their intention is to spend January through the middle of summer next year, really like actually making the strategic plan that would account for how they're going to maintain, how they're going to be reducing their carbon emissions, how they will build food security or fresh food storage and kind of like all the infrastructure. And then they will submit the plan back to us. We will review, ask any other follow-up questions or clarifications. And then assuming that it's a good plan and that it's hitting all of the things that we want to achieve, the remaining funds will then be distributed via an amendment. So my intention would be to come back to council at that time, share the report, talk about it, and then decide how to go forward after that.
Thank you. And I don't know if we've ever done this or if it's something we can do, but I wonder when it's a city mission and city funded, if we can make our fleet services available to a mission like this for these kinds of things. I don't know if it would even be a savings, but it just seems like might be worth exploring.
Thanks. I'll make a note of that.
Madam Mayor.
I think that this is really cool. I've worked with a lot of these organizations as a volunteer for a long time. And so I think it's great to kind of see a lot of this coming together in a more meaningful way. I think a really important piece of any strategic plan and any kind of startup funding that we give to an organization like this, and we've seen it before, is that they need to have a sustainable funding plan going forward so that we're not funding this ongoing, that this is truly a startup, and that then we're able to hand off a sustainable organization to the community. So that'll be something that I'll be looking for as part of that strategic planning.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. So Chloe, I'm not exactly sure if the Idaho Food Bank, if there is a low income requirement, if you've got to show that you have a need for that. But I do know that, from experience in the last recession, there are folks who fall in between the cracks. They may be working full time. They, by all appearances, should be able to purchase the food that they need, but they can't. And I'm wondering if there is a component to this program that will ensure that those folks who typically would not qualify for services because they don't look low income on paper, is there a commitment to providing those folks with services? Because it doesn't matter what the paper says. If you're hungry, you're hungry. And just wondering if these folks are committed to making sure that those folks who fall through the gaps do not fall through the gaps.
Councilmember Sanchez, I think that the identification of those spoke organizations really hit that mark in working closely with community groups who are part of those specific groups or populations or neighborhoods and are really saying, here's my on the ground experience, here's these relationships that I have with these people, and therefore here's how we can collaborate to make sure that we are serving them. So I have made a note of that, but I know that that intention is really integral to what they're trying to do.
Thank you, Chloe. And if that, I mean, I don't know how much feedback we can give, so I'm just going for it. That needs to be overtly communicated. It's not a message that we hear often. There's always this concern that someone's trying to get away with something. It's typically my experience that people don't ask for help unless they actually need it. They're not trying to game the system. So, you know, if we can incorporate some level of grace into that, I think it would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just quick comment. And I'm not exactly sure how to word this, but Council President sort of brought up the idea of the city's partnership with fleet maintenance or what that might look like. And I don't know if that's the exact line that would take, but I know that this is sort of intended to be a spoken hub model, you know, sort of process. And I know that City of Good distributes so much of their food through our community centers and through our schools, that the city certainly does have a little bit of a role, you know, to play here in how we're kind of collaborating and working. So I think it's exciting. You know, I think there's probably an opportunity somehow for the city to play, you know, that role as one of the spokes in that spoken hub model.
Great.
Madam Mayor, I just want to point something out. You know, I think we're always going to have these issues of poverty with us. I mean, it would be great if we could do something miraculous that we don't have that, but I think a good indicator that we need to prepare that this is going to be the support that we're going to offer our people is, you know, we look at Boise State University. I think, you know, we all grew up with that saying of, you know, a starving college student. Well, there's nothing special about that. There's nothing noble about that. It's a painful experience to have. And the fact that you've got on the campus of Boise State a food pantry, it's staffed. It has normalized that, you know, this is something we provide to our students. You know, I visited the GIM lab a few years ago with then Mayor Beater, discovered that students had created an app, a Beam app, to let folks know that, hey, guess what? There's extra food in the Bishop Barnwell room between 2 and 2:30. Come help yourselves. So we've got, you know, we're addressing, you know, we don't want that food ending up in the landfill, right? But I remember being a student at Boise State and sneaking into those conference rooms to put food in my backpack. Now the environment is different. Now it's like, no, you don't have to sneak it. Come get it. We want you to have this. And the fact that you had students who were working on technology, of all the things that they could have created with that ability, the fact that they're thinking in terms of compassion and grace towards their fellow students, that they would use that to make sure that their fellow students could eat and not waste the food on the campus. I think that's an indication of where we're going, that we normalize that we help people certainly to eat when they need it. So just something to think about.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. I think you've highlighted the importance of the community partnerships and that this is not just a one organization endeavor, that we have to have all of these organizations in the community thinking about the same thing. Okay, finally, our mental health program. The intention of the mental health chunk of money, that $2 million, is to support providers in our community to increase access to affordable, equitable, culturally and linguistically appropriate mental health care services for particularly low income, underserved, underinsured individuals and families. So with that intention, we put out a notice of funding opportunity this summer and received 22 applications after a really intentional and thoughtful and frankly challenging scoring process. 8 organizations were selected to be funded at 100%. Those organizations are listed here. We have 7 for approval today and 1 for approval at January 10th. And these projects range in scope from providing coordinated comprehensive behavioral health care to frankly anyone who is in need, to hiring social workers to increase service levels at these organizations, to the provision of individuals and group therapy sessions for pregnant women and survivors of domestic violence. All of these programs target residents who are low income, underserved, and underinsured. As I noted, we have 7 agreements on the consent agenda. There is one final one that will be on for January 10th, and that one is St. Luke's. And that is simply because St. Luke's has a similar legal review process as the city of Boise and couldn't review and approve before the new year. All of these projects are scheduled to start in January.
Madam Mayor. Chloe, as you review these applications, excuse me, do these organizations have enough staff to do this extra work? Was that one of the considerations?
That was one of the considerations. In some instances, it was the dollars will go to partially funding a new staff member so that services can be enhanced or extended. And in others, it's the provision of a new opportunity, extended hours, a new space.
So we just might follow up as the money goes out and ensure that they're actually able to staff up like we expect, because given the challenges in the healthcare space right now, that might be a challenge.
We are part of the agreement and part of the grant is that we will be asking these organizations to provide reporting on a quarterly basis where we're having them track specific metrics and who they are actually serving, who's coming. And that's part of it too, is making sure that they are achieving what they have set out to do.
Yeah, thank you. And just encourage them to be creative if they need to be.
Madam Mayor, just in line with what Council President Clegg said about being creative, do you know if these folks embrace the telehealth approach to this?
Councilmember Sanchez, yes. I am trying to recall specific examples within the projects that were pitched. And while it is eluding me right now, I do recall the ability to provide expanding services by providing virtual services as well. So yes.
Madam Mayor, I think it's important that they offer it, that it not be an extra. I mean, again, COVID has shown us what we're capable of because we had to be. The reality is telehealth makes it possible for people who don't have cars, who are trying to save gas money. They're more likely to have a phone than they are to have a car in this environment. So I think it is imperative that they offer telehealth.
Madam Mayor, go for it.
I just wanted to reflect back on the ARPA listening sessions that some of us attended and how well these allocations align with what we heard from the public. We heard a lot from small businesses who were struggling. We heard from people struggling with childcare. We heard from people who were struggling with food access and people struggling to access mental health. And this really, I remember back then it was very vacuous, like, okay, well, we're getting some funding from the federal government. Where is that going to go? And so through those listening sessions, through your work, through the work of many others at the city, we were able to allocate those in the places that we heard from people that they desperately needed at that time. And I think that that need has not gone away. So thank you for all of that work. Thank you for listening to the people that we heard from who were in some really tough situations at that time. And I'm sure that's continued. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Chloe, these are great organizations. Thanks for the hard work and going through. I'm sure it's difficult to whittle down from 22 to 8. Do you know if any of the applications that we are approving, if they serve, if they have the intention of serving or expanding services to our refugee community?
Councilmember Halliburton, yes, that is one of the primary groups that we really wanted to make sure that we were serving, is that, and that they were providing culturally and linguistically appropriate care services in being intentional about our refugee groups.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I have to give a shout out to Kate Nelson, who really also attended those listening sessions and spent a lot of time talking with different groups in our community and helping to create and envision what these programs could look like. So finally, in conclusion, just a quick recap. We have 7 mental health agreements on the consent agenda for your approval today. That remaining one will come up on January 10th. The City of Good agreement will also be on the agenda for January 10th. And then I will be back in late spring, probably summer, with some additional information on the food security City of Good strategic plan and sort of next steps on that.
Madam Mayor, I just have one more question. Will there be a centralized place on the city website or somewhere else where folks can plug into these expanded mental health services and some of the other programs we're providing?
Good question. We have a central website with specific information about each of these. With the approval of these agreements, I think we'll feel more free to go forward and provide more information. And I think we can be providing additional information on our website about that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Good to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Next up, we have the team from Steptoe and Johnson here to speak with us about the internal investigation. I've asked the council president to move so the 3 of you can actually come up and sit next to each other. Welcome. I'll ask you if you'd first start with introductions and then launch into the presentation.
My name is Mike Bromwich.
Yep. And I'm Naila Ogle.
So it's a pleasure to be here and talk with you about the internal investigation that we've been asked to do. I think the city is actually quite forward-looking in deciding to act in a proactive way to get to the bottom of some of the allegations that have been out there in the public domain over the last 3 weeks, to explore whether there is policing that has been infected by racial bias or racist views. I think a lot of cities wait until something is done to them, which is a mistake. I think you are wise to, on a proactive basis, bring in a group of people who will conduct the investigation and give you the answers that you're looking for. So let me tell you a little bit about my background, and then my colleagues will talk about themselves a little bit. I've been in and around law enforcement for about 40 years. I was a federal prosecutor in New York and in Washington, D.C. And then I was the Inspector General for the Department of Justice from 1994 to 1999. And for those of you who aren't clear about that, Inspector General in the Department of Justice has oversight over the Justice Department's law enforcement organizations, which includes the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the United States Marshals Service, the Bureau of Prisons, and at the time that I did it, the Immigration Service, which was subsequent to 9/11, transferred to the Department of Homeland Security. So in that role, I directed investigations into misconduct or violations of law by members of those law enforcement agencies. I supervised a law enforcement agency myself. We had 180 criminal investigators with arrest authority, with search warrant authority, and so forth. With a brief break in about 2010 to 2011, I've been in the private sector since 1999, and really for the last 20 years have focused on local policing in a variety of roles. So I was the independent monitor of the DC Police Department, the Metropolitan Police Department, for 6 years, from 2002 to 2008. As you probably know, the Justice Department has a program in which they investigate whether there is a pattern or practice of civil rights violations by local law enforcement agencies. That program was actually launched in 1994, has resulted in a number of agreements and consent decrees around the country, many of which are still ongoing. And so that was, even though I had worked with local law enforcement officers before, that was my first deep dive into local law enforcement. And I have found it extremely gratifying over time to deal with local policing, which is really where the rubber meets the road between law enforcement and communities. Federal law enforcement is important, but it is really sort of up there a little bit in the ether compared to what local law enforcement officers do. So over the years, I have worked with a variety of police departments around the country, did a huge investigation of the Houston Police Department crime lab from 2005 to 2007, worked closely with Chicago Police Department as a consultant as they were trying to reform their police department from 2016 to 2019, and just finished this past January a very extensive and intensive investigation of the Baltimore Police Department corruption issues in the Baltimore Police Department. So I have a lot of experience, and now my firm has substantial experience in doing investigations of law enforcement agencies. And after my colleagues tell you about their backgrounds, I'll talk a little bit more about what our approach will be here, and then more than happy to take any questions you may have.
Good afternoon. I'm Julia Gatto. Before joining Steptoe, I was in government service. My entire legal career has been in the criminal justice system, but for the last 15 years before joining Steptoe, I worked at the Federal Public Defender's Office out of the Southern District of New York, where my work with policing was both on a local level and a federal level. Before that, I was doing just criminal defense practice. So my experience is exclusively criminal justice work with a lot of focus on policing.
Good morning. My name is Naila Ogle. I joined Steptoe in Johnson right out of law school. I started in the defense of insurance companies and worked in reinsurance. And in the last year, I focused my work on white collar criminal law and investigation. So representing companies or individuals who have had charges brought against them by the SEC, CFTC, or the DOJ. I actually had an opportunity to work with the DC Metro Police Department for a year in law school, where we just sort of wanted to assist with community policing, work on unconscious bias and other community building things to build a better repertoire, I guess, a rapport with the community and police officers.
So let me just talk for a couple of minutes about what our approach will be. And we've been really lucky to meet with a number of members of this council, the city attorney's office, and others already, your local prosecutor. We thought it was very important, following your approval of the contract, to come out here and start the work immediately. We've already burdened your city attorney with fairly extensive document requests, because this investigation will be based on a careful review of relevant documents, as well as interviews with relevant personnel, both current and former, from the department. I spoke with your acting chief last week and asked him to send around a memo to the police department asking for their full cooperation with our investigation, because that's the only way we'll get to the bottom of this, is if we have the full cooperation of members of the police department. And they come to believe, as the chief said in his note, But this investigation will be in the long run for the better good of the department. So we will be talking to people starting, we've already started, we'll continue today and tomorrow, and that will continue over time. Once we get the documents that start rolling in, we'll have a basis for asking some specific pointed questions, both of the people that we've already spoken to and the people that will be identified through the documents. You never know at the beginning of an investigation like this where it will lead and what you will find. We have a scope that's defined by the scope of the agreement that you ratified last week, and we will do our very best to stay within the confines of that. But the focus is, did racist or white supremacist views infect the behavior of police officers? Not whether they held those views privately, not whether they expressed those views privately, but whether they infected the work of the department through enforcement practices, through traffic stops, through arrests without probable cause, through abusive conduct with members of minority communities here. Those are the things that you and the community have a right to know whether those things happened. I can't tell you exactly how long this will take. We promise you a comprehensive but an investigation where we exercise judgment about what is worth pursuing and what is not worth pursuing. I have frequently heard from people at the top of law enforcement agencies that we will leave no stone unturned, or we will follow every lead. No, we won't do that, because that is a ticket to an endless and very costly investigation. Conducting investigations like this are all about exercising judgment about what is worth pursuing and what is not worth pursuing. And we obviously have a very well qualified team to make those judgments. At the end of our investigation, we will deliver to you a public, comprehensive report of our investigation, which will tell you exactly how we conducted the investigation, the facts we collected during the investigation, our findings and conclusions as a result of that investigation, and any recommendations for changes and reforms in the police department. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to look at the report that we did of the Baltimore Police Department. That is roughly the format that we followed there. And we were fortunate enough to have a fabulous working relationship with the commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department. And literally within days of our delivering those recommendations, he agreed to implement all of them and is in the process of doing so. So I wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have at this time. The only other thing I would add is, when we did the investigation in the Houston Police Department Crime Lab, we actually issued some interim reports because we thought there was such acute public interest there, and we were finding things that we thought the police department needed to know in real time rather than waiting for our final report. And so that's what we did. When we began the Baltimore Police Department investigation, we reserved the possibility of doing that. But I made the decision that that was not appropriate in that context, and it would be a diversion and distraction, and that we should charge on to the finish line and just deliver a final report. I don't know what we will do here. It's possible that we will issue interim reports. So that is a possibility, but we guarantee you we will issue a final public report.
I just want to note that on this visit, you all met with the council president and I and several others, but that we're going to open that up to other council members who are interested in a subsequent visit.
Absolutely.
From you all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we met with the mayor and you and Councilman Member Clegg. So yes, and happy to meet with those that we didn't meet with.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for being here today. I would note that in our conversation yesterday, you did note the possibility of interim reports if necessary. I think that that's important to note, because while we hope that there isn't a reason for such a report, it is good to know that if there is a reason, we'll get it and be able to act in a timely manner.
The other thing I would add to that is if we find something that needs to be brought to the attention either of members of this council or leadership of the police department, immediately we will do so. We're not going to wait months and months and months and then, have a gotcha finding down the road. We don't view this as a sort of a scientific experiment where we need this scientific slide that needs to remain sort of unchanged during the course of our investigation. We will let you know, and we will let the police department leadership know if there's anything that requires urgent attention.
I have a question because we've received it from several members of the public, and that is there a way, or can there be created a way for members of the public, even employees, if you will, that would like to provide feedback or share information? Is there a way for them to do that confidentially?
Yeah, and I'm very glad you asked that question. We are constructing a website which has already begun, and that website will have a portal both to submit questions, concerns, requests to talk to us, either by email, or we'll also provide a phone number for people to provide us with that information. So that it's critical that members of the community that feel they have seen evidence that is related to our investigation, that they feel free to come forward and provide that information to us. So thank you for the question.
Madam Mayor, yeah, just kind of following up, should we expect, you've mentioned looking over documents, we've mentioned a portal now where people can bring information to you. Should we expect that you will be potentially doing interviews with members of the public, members of potentially past police officers as well?
We will definitely make efforts to talk to former police officers, and we will certainly respond to requests from members of the public that they want to speak with us. We don't know what the response of former officers will be. I found in the work that we did in Baltimore that it was crucial to talk to some of them, and we were lucky enough to get most of the key ones to cooperate with us. In some cases, we had a hard time locating them. If they had been gone from the police department for 3, 4, 5 years, I found, and I hope it's not the case here, that the police department had very poor records on forwarding addresses and forwarding phone numbers. And so we were simply unable to find them. But we think that former members have a lot to offer us in terms of the insights that they gained while members of the police department. So that will be an important part of our investigation, not just current members, but former members as well.
Great. That's good to hear. I appreciate that. And I just want to say I appreciate your comments as well, is that like this should be a good thing, in the end, long term, we're looking to create a police department that's better, stronger, that serves our community more, and a good way, for them to move forward doing that. So I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I'll just wrap. I want to thank you for being here and for starting the conversations that you're having. There are two things that I think are key to point out in your remarks. The first one was pointed out by Councilmember Halliburton, that this really is designed. We've had some questions about, well, why are you looking at a former officer? This is designed not to look at the officer, but to look at policing in this community to help us ensure, both to the public and to our officers, that we are providing the best service possible in the fairest and most just ways. But the other piece that you pointed out that I will continue to remind people about is it's not about whether or not someone harbors a belief or gives voice to a belief. It is about whether or not those beliefs impact behaviors while on the job. And that's the importance of looking at data and records and determining whether that happened. And then the steps that and I should say the police department needs to take to ensure that it doesn't happen in the future. Thank you.
Exactly right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. So welcome.
Thank you.
So basically it's to find out whether this individual's philosophies have infected our department and then may have played out in the way they interact with the public. This individual worked with our organization for many years. Is there a possibility that it happened the other way around? Maybe this individual was infected by the people who work for the city of Boise. Because as you may have observed, I'm the only person of color on the Boise City Council. I'm a former civil rights investigator with the Idaho Human Rights Commission. And my first arrival with this organization, I immediately saw problems coming from our HR department of all places. And I have a perspective that only I can have. I don't blame anybody else for not being able to see what I see. That's my concern, is that we scapegoat one department when we may have issues that permeate our entire organization. It's not one individual who does that. I mean, we live in a city that was based on white supremacy. It's not a hyperbolic statement. Do a little Googling about how Boise came to be Boise. Our departments reflect our community. That's my concern, is that we address whatever issue is discovered or not discovered with Boise Police Department, and then the rest of us feel we're off the hook. That's them. I don't believe that's the case. I think that moving forward, we all need to take responsibility for the organization that we occupy. And I just want to make sure that that's part of the thought process as well.
It is part of our thought process, and you are now on our agenda as someone we would really like to talk to in detail about these issues.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor, one last question. The mayor's comments reminded me, if the data isn't available to really understand the impact of our policing on racial or ethnic minorities because it wasn't collected, what other methods do you have to begin to understand that?
Well, it really will be through a combination of reviewing the documents and the data that are available and interviews with current and former members of the police department. And it may be that at the end of the day, one of our recommendations is that such data be collected so that in the future you will have a strong database of relevant information that can be used going forward to manage the department and identify problems in the department.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're very
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
And with that, we have nothing else before us, so we'll come back at noon. Thanks all.